Lock and Gary Player. Now those 3 awards were issued tonight, plus we have an award which we gave to the Rookie of the Year, and we gave an award to the winner of the Big Easy Tour. The special award we gave tonight is called the Commissioner's Award, which is goes to a player.
It's your weather.
The South African Weather Service have issued a warning for high fire danger expected over the western parts of the country, so runaway fires are possible within those regions. Another weather alert, so this is where the most significant rainfall will be happening for today. Up to a 60% chance of rain is forecast over Gauteng, eastern parts of the northwest, KwaZulu-Natal and northern parts of the Eastern Cape, but fine and dry for the rest of South Africa. Our highs for today, Johannesburg will be at 26, Pretoria at 29, same with Mbombela and Polokwane. We're expecting a high of 30 near Durban, and Richards Bay will be picking up to 32 degrees. 38-degree temperature is forecast over Uppington. We're expecting cool temperatures for the central interior of South Africa, with Bethlehem and Bloemfontein picking up to 15 degrees. For Durban and Richards Bay, temperatures will be dropping between 22 to 23 degrees. Along the west coast of the Republic, we're expecting south-southeasterly flow for Alexandra Bay with good beach conditions and swell heights reaching up to 2.5 meters. And along the south coast, we're expecting bad beach conditions for Cape Agulhas, moderate for Hermanus, but bad beach conditions expected for Falls Bay and Cape Atlantic, with swells reaching up to 3 meters. Along the south coast, we're expecting bad beach conditions due to rainfall being forecast over those regions, and wind speeds will be between 25 to 30 kilometers per hour, and swell heights will reach up to 2.5 meters. And for the east coast of South Africa, we're still expecting bad beach conditions between East London and Durban, and swell heights will reach up to 2 meters. Well, that's all from me from the Weather Center. Hope you have a good day.
One world, one hope. Support the fight against cancer. Take part in Cancer Relay for Life. Visit relayforlife.co.za or call toll-free on 0800 22 6622.
20 years into democracy, South Africa still faces major social challenges. The road to success is still under construction. In 2012, government unearthed its plan to tackle the country's infrastructure deficit. From roads and railways to homes, hospitals, ports and power plants, all in a bid to unlock mineral resources and connect the people to the main economic artery. But has a proper foundation been laid? Join us as we investigate the challenges faced in building South Africa. ENCA, know more about your world.
When you think of Africa, what comes to mind? Here, we remember our stories, toast our triumphs, lift our leaders. We own our future. See the real Africa, your Africa. Watch Africa 360 and see Africa like you've never seen it before.
An election is just months away, and this man has the biggest balancing act in the land. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan must promise South Africans that a better life for all isn't far away. He must also convince the markets that South Africa is watching its debt. Will taxes go up or down? And how will the government spend your money? Join us on the 26th of February at 2 as we unpack the numbers, bringing you insight into what it means for you, your business, and most importantly, your pocket. ENCA, you deserve to know more.
Live visuals coming to us from the North Gauteng High Court, where a ruling is expected shortly on whether the Oscar Pistorius trial can be broadcast live.
Meanwhile, Eskom says its power system is severely constrained and warns consumers to reduce electricity usage.
Friends and family are about to lay to rest two Soweto girls murdered in an apparent ritual killing.
Live from South Africa, this is ENCA. I'm Gareth Edwards, just gone 11:30. A huge pleasure to be with you this morning.
Good to join you. I'm Joanne Joseph. This is our top story at this hour.
Media houses are going to find out shortly if they're going to be allowed to broadcast the Oscar Pistorius trial live. The North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria is expected to make this ruling in an application to film the proceedings shortly.
Right, these visuals are coming to us live from that courtroom. The application, of course, has been brought by our organisation ENCA. It's been joined by MultiChoice and Eyewitness News. They intend to film only the testimonies of police experts and not those of unwilling witnesses.
The NPA was initially against the application, you might remember, but made an about-turn last week. Pistorius' lawyers want the application dismissed. They say broadcasting the trial could make witnesses alter their testimony.
Well, Reva Steenkamp's parents would not be drawn on the application for this media access, but our reporter, Kathy Mutlatlana, says the case will set a precedent in courts, granting the media permission to broadcast trials.
Well, that's right. We'll bring you that decision in a couple of minutes from now. We did have you live inside that court. We'll also bring you the rolling coverage of what's been dubbed the trial of the century. It's due to begin this coming Monday. But we are going to stay with the big story for today. It is this application for the media, various media houses, to be allowed inside court to take photos, to allow for radio stations to take the audio as well. It's expected to begin in the next few minutes.
That's right. And with us in studio we have Caxton Professor of Journalism from Wits University, Anton Harbour, and Director of Media Monitoring Africa, William Bird. They, of course, joining us for a discussion on this. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming in this morning. How fair, to start with you, Anton, is this application going before the courts today from the point of view of both the media wanting to cover it and Oscar Pistorius, who must stand in front of those cameras and testify?
Well, I don't think the question before the court is what the media wants. It's a question of what serves justice best. Justice is served by an open court. Our constitution is clear that it prioritizes transparency and openness, particularly in the justice system. But that has to be weighed against any potential prejudice in the trial, any negative effects it can have on Pistorius' right to a fair trial.
William Bird, in your opinion, can this in any way jeopardize Pistorius' right to a fair trial?
Well, I think that in some instances it certainly could, and we've seen a general reluctance by courts to allow live recordings of criminal matters. Where they have allowed them, it's been under very particular and quite strict conditions. And what the media have needed to show in those instances is that there's an overwhelming public interest to give the media access to that. So in addition to the open justice principles, which of course we fully support, there is the idea of is it in the public interest that you can then weigh against what else is going on in that court case. So for example, in Eugene Terreblanche's murder trial, again, they wanted to make sure that they were able to be inside the court. The media were to be allowed in the court and to be able to report from within the court. And because one of the accused was a minor, what they did was they made a separate plan. They had a separate room where the cameras were set up so that the child in that instance couldn't be seen, and that the media could sit there and watch it, and other interested parties could sit and watch that and see effectively what was going on. So we've seen that in general terms, our justice system is very keen on trying to make sure that they encourage the principle of open justice balanced against this idea of what potentially may harm those that are either testifying or those that are there. We've seen in the Constitutional Court, of course, encourages media to go and cover and report widely on those cases. Obviously, dealing with constitutional principles, they're very important. So this around a criminal trial, it's going to be very interesting to see what they've done. And you can see that the media houses have done a lot to try and mitigate any potential harm already by saying we're going to make sure that the cameras are unobtrusive. They're not going to be staffed by an individual who sits standing there, filming them. They're going to be remote controlled. They're going to be small, all of those sorts of things. So they've done their part to try and say, we'll do this and make sure that we're sensitive in the way that we cover it.
Anton, I know that you've been quite outspoken on the behaviour of the media. We saw this during the previous appearances of Oscar Pistorius. Do you think this is a lesson in how the media should actually handle itself? In fact, I think we're going to leave my question to Anton Harbour there for the moment. My apologies, Anton. We're going to go now live to the Pretoria, the Gauteng North court, where this court case is going to be taking place. We're expecting the judge to enter any moment. Let's listen in on what the application will be.
Personally suffered enormous harm when hearing the bail proceedings approached the court, and the media was very clearly not able to actually take the details of what was provided.
There we have Judge Dunstan Mlambo. He is the man who is presiding over this matter before the courts this morning. A number of media houses going to the North Gauteng High Court asking that in the public interest this Oscar Pistorius trial for the murder of Reeva Steenkamp be broadcast. Now there is a great deal of interest in it. A number of media houses there, as you see, present at this application today. It really is a huge test case, isn't it, for South Africa in terms of media access to a private citizen's trial in a court. Well,
that's right, and I think while we're waiting, Joe, and I think let's bring Anton Harbour in. We'll hear his voice while we're talking about this as well. I was putting the question to you, Anton, while we're waiting for proceedings to officially get underway, of how the media handle themselves, and I'm sure the judge would have looked at this because South African media did take a bit of a slamming during the last appearance of Oscar Pistorius.
Look, the last time it was a bail hearing at short notice with massive global and local interest. This time, fortunately, there's been more time to prepare, to manage the media. So, for example, seats are allocated very carefully and as fairly as possible in the courtroom, and there's agreements about sharing material to enable coverage, for example. But the reality is that the media in a pack, when everyone is chasing one story, is not at its best. It's not when we feel proudest of our colleagues in the media, I must say. So one just hopes that that people are not tempted to push the boundaries, as they often are when they're all chasing one story, looking for an extra angle, looking for an extra interview, looking to break something extra. That's unfortunately when the rules, when media ethics, when journalistic ethics tend to get bent.
Talking about the rights of a private citizen here, it's a little bit of a different picture, isn't it, when we're talking about someone who is accountable to the public in terms of his role as a public servant, or a role, say, a governmental post that a person is holding, and say he goes before the courts for a corruption trial involving taxpayers' money and so forth. One almost understands that the public then has a right to being able to observe that trial within a courtroom. However, when it comes to the right of a private citizen, does it matter? Should it matter how well known that person is?
It shouldn't, but the reality of the celebrity culture we live in, and I suppose it's partly the result of people like him cultivating media attention over the years, that there's a sense now of entitlement to put him under greater scrutiny than an ordinary person. It's not really a question of right or wrong, it's a reality of our media situation.
Just to bring you up to speed as to what's going on at the moment, there was a slight delay. We were expecting this ruling earlier this morning at 11 o'clock. We'll take you back into the court for the moment. Let's just help you understand exactly what is going on. This is Judge Dunstan Mlambo. We believe he is now beginning proceedings.
The electronic, broadcast and print media have approached this court to grant them permission to record through audiovisual and photographic means the entire criminal proceedings in the matter of the state versus Oscar Leonard Pistorius. The matter brings into sharp focus the interface between the functioning of the criminal justice system on the one hand and the quest by the media to participate in that system on the other hand. This interface finds expression in a number of critical constitutional rights that are seemingly on a collision course with one another. These are the rights of an accused person and the prosecution to a fair trial on the one hand, and the freedom of expression rights of the media or the press, as well as the open justice principle. Pistorius is due to stand trial on a charge of murder arising from an incident that took place during the night of 14 February 2013, a date recognized by many as Valentine's Day. During this incident, Ms. Riva Steenkamp lost her life. Steenkamp and Pistorius were involved in a romantic relationship at that stage. This trial is due to commence on the 3rd of March in this court in just over a week's time. ETV and ESAT, who I refer to as the ETV applicants, approached this court in August last year by way of notice of motion, seeking permission to broadcast the entire criminal proceedings through audio-visual and/or alternatively audio means. At that stage, the Director of Public Prosecutions attached to this court, as well as Pistorius, opposed the relief sought. Later, other applicants filed applications similar to the ETV application, specifically representing the print and broadcast media. The print media applicants sought the permission of this court to install cameras in the trial courtroom to take still photographs of the entire proceedings. Their application was similarly opposed by Pistorius. In the background, there were, however, discussions between all the applicants, the DPP, and to some extent, Pistorius, through his legal representatives, seeking to strike a compromise position regarding the relief sought by the applicants and the stance adopted by the DPP and Pistorius. At that stage, the broadcast media applicants had not filed papers, even though they were involved and represented in the discussions. These applicants filed their application on the eve of a meeting convened by the Deputy Judge President of this court, aimed at bringing all the parties together with a view to case managing and streamlining the matter. The broadcast media applicants pertinently sought the permission of this court to televise the criminal trial proceedings. As a result of the ongoing discussions, the opposition by the DPP to the relief sought fell away after a compromise position was arrived at. Pistorius, however, is opposed to any form of coverage sought by the applicants. Before I deal with the full extent of the opposition that remains from Mr. Pistorius, what is necessary at this stage is to dispose of an important housekeeping issue relating to the 3 applications before me regarding the consolidation of the print and broadcasting applications with the ETV application. That request is not opposed, and in my view, it is prudent that all the applications be consolidated, and I hereby order this. What all the applicants have set as their launching base for the relief they seek is, in the first place, the fact that Pistorius is a local and international icon, and that Steenkamp was similarly placed. In their collective view, the criminal proceedings due to commence in a week's time have captured the attention and imagination of both the South African and international communities. In their view, it is in the public interest that the heightened attention focused on this matter be adequately accommodated through the means for which they seek permission to record and inform these communities of the trial proceedings as exhaustively as possible. Reference was made in this regard to the near chaotic situation that was experienced in the Magistrates' Court of this city when Pistorius applied for bail last year. It is common cause that during those proceedings, the courtroom allocated for the bail proceedings was wholly inadequate and could not accommodate all the journalists and members of the public who showed up seeking to attend and cover the proceedings. It is also common cause that the media attention and coverage of the bail proceedings attracted journalists far beyond our borders. Those proceedings were in fact extensively covered by the print, broadcast, and electronic media locally and internationally. The interest in the upcoming trial has remained very strong, with international media houses sending scores of journalists to cover it. This background is relied on as a basis, as I've mentioned earlier, by the applicants to assert that it is in the public interest that they be granted permission to cover the trial with a view to informing all and sundry about it. The applicants have forthrightly asserted their right to freedom of expression, which in their view justifies the permission they seek. These applicants also rely on the open justice principle for the pending criminal trial proceedings to receive as much publication as possible. Section 16 of the Constitution, in particular Section 16(1)(a), guarantees everyone the freedom of expression, which includes the freedom of the press and other media, as well as the freedom to receive and/or disseminate information and ideas. In this regard, our Constitutional Court in the South African National Defence Union versus Minister of Defence and another matter expressed the content of this right as follows, and I quote, "Freedom of expression lies at the heart of a democracy. It is valuable for many reasons, including its instrumental function as a guarantor of democracy, its implicit recognition and protection of the moral agency of individuals in our society, and its facilitation of the search for truth by individuals and society generally. The Constitution recognizes that individuals in our society need to be able to hear, form, and express opinions and views freely on a wide range of matters," and I close quotes. In a further articulation of the freedom of expression right, the Constitutional Court in Khumalo and others versus Holomisa stressed the following with regard to the role played by the media in relation to freedom of expression, and I quote, "The print, broadcast, and electronic media have a particular role in the protection of freedom of expression in our society. Every citizen has a right to freedom of the press and the media, and the right to receive information and ideas. The media are key agents in ensuring that these aspects of the right to freedom of information are respected." Our courts have also grappled with the issue of permitting the exercise of the freedom of expression right in court proceedings. A decision that comes to mind is .com Trading Pty Limited versus King and others. The issue in that matter was whether or not to allow the audio broadcasting of the King Commission that was investigating match fixing in the sport of cricket in South Africa. In a further matter, the South African Broadcasting Corporation Limited versus Thatcher and others, the court was directly confronted with a request to broadcast criminal court proceedings. The court there conducted an authoritative analysis of the legal landscape locally and internationally, and in granting limited coverage, that court stated that it had to exercise its discretion to issue a just and equitable order while taking cognizance of its inherent power to regulate its own proceedings. This involved balancing the right to privacy against the right of freedom of expression, which, in the case of the media, translate into freedom of the press. In addition to the .com and Thatcher decisions, the two courts in this country whose decisions bind me and this court have also spoken on this subject, and I have derived valuable guidance from the decisions concerned. One such decision is from the Supreme Court of Appeal in the South African Broadcasting Corporation Limited versus Downer SC&O and others. In that matter, the SCA considered and refused an application by the SABC to televise and sound record the appeal proceedings it was due to hear. This decision was taken on appeal to the Constitutional Court, whose judgment is reported as South African Broadcasting Corporation Limited versus the National Director of Public Prosecutions. In its majority judgment, our highest court, whilst confirming the Supreme Court of Appeal decision, explored the appropriate approaches to be followed by courts when considering applications of this nature. I will revert to these decisions later in my judgment. It must be stated that when considering the exercise of the media's freedom of expression right in the courtroom, one has to confront the elephant in the room, that is the right to a fair trial, which is invariably asserted against the former right. It is that situation that confronts us in this matter. Whilst these may not have been so pronounced in the .con matter, the clash of these rights has featured prominently in the decisions of the Supreme Court of Appeal and the Constitutional Court, and how the competing rights should be balanced. Pistorius contends that the live broadcasting through audio, audiovisual, and still photographic means of his criminal trial will infringe his right to a fair trial. His view is that the mere knowledge of audiovisual equipment, especially cameras, will inhibit him as an individual, as well as his witnesses when they give evidence. He has also asserted that his counsel may be inhibited in questioning witnesses and the presentation of his case. In his view, the requested broadcasting of his trial will have a direct bearing on the fairness of his trial. Pistorius contends that should the relief be granted, he will most certainly not enjoy a fair trial. His disposition is that the proposed media coverage will be inhibiting, and in view of the fact that witnesses will be subjected to searching questioning, the audio and visual recordings or still photography during the proceedings will be conspicuously intrusive and potentially distracting. He further asserts that the presence of audio-visual recording equipment and cameras in the courtroom could be conspicuously intrusive and regarded by his witnesses to be a potentially distracting feature. He further is of the view that covering his trial as is sought by the applicants will enable witnesses who are still to testify to fabricate and adapt their evidence based on their knowledge of what other witnesses have testified. Our Constitutional Court has been very vocal regarding the protection of the right to a fair trial. Indeed, any accused person who appears in a court of law facing any charge has the constitutionally guaranteed right to a fair trial, which includes the foundational values of dignity, freedom, and equality, which are central to a fair trial. In this regard, the Constitutional Court in State v. Zuguda and others, State v. Chilo, confirmed that the right to a fair trial is, and I quote, a comprehensive right and embraces a concept of substantive fairness, I close quote, and that at the heart of the right to a fair criminal trial and what infuses its purpose is for justice to be done and also to be seen to be done. There is, therefore, before me, a clear contestation of rights. In resolving that contestation, Section 173 of the Constitution enjoins me in whatever I do to ensure that the interests of justice are upheld. That section provides that, and I quote, the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal, and the High Court of South Africa each have the power to protect and regulate their process and to develop the common law taking into account the interests of justice, I close quotes. The Constitutional Court has given guidance to courts in general on how to go about when considering applications of this nature and upon the exercise of their powers under Section 173. In the South African Broadcasting Corporation Limited versus NDP matter, the Constitutional Court confirmed that Section 173 affirms the impartiality and independence of the courts, especially in the regard that the section recognizes the inherent power of the courts, recognize and protect their own processes. The court further confirmed that in the exercise of the inherent power in terms of Section 173, courts must ensure that primarily their proceedings are fair. The overarching objective of any court in the exercise of its power in terms of Section 173 is that the court must take into account the interests of justice. Of particular importance is what the court said in paragraph 37, and I quote, when courts exercise the power to regulate their own process, it is inevitable that the power will affect rights entrenched in Chapter 2 of the Constitution. A court must regulate the way proceedings are conducted And this will inevitably affect both the right to a fair trial, Section 35 of the Constitution, and the right to have disputes resolved by courts, Section 34. Courts are bound by the provisions of the Bill of Rights, and therefore bear a duty to respect those rights. In exercising the power, therefore, they must take care to ensure that those rights are not unjustifiably attenuated, I close quotes. It is inevitable, therefore, that as any court goes about exercising the power, it must engage in a balancing exercise when it deals with a number of competing rights to ensure that the interests of justice are safeguarded. The phrase interest of justice does not only relate to an accused person's right to a fair trial, but also to the prosecution's right to a fair trial, and that other interested persons' rights in the same proceedings should also be promoted. As part of the court's effort to regulate the process that takes place, a practice directive was also issued by this court some time ago to regulate matters of this nature. The balancing exercise that courts must undertake is related to how and to what extent does the court allow the enjoyment of each right asserted. The right to a fair trial asserted by Pistorius, and as argued on his behalf, suggests that the freedom of expression rights to which the applicants lay claim should be attenuated, and that the open justice principle should necessarily suffer the same fate. It is inevitable, as the opposition by Pistorius suggests, that in the exercise of the Balancing Act, as well as the power found in Section 173, some, if not all, the rights will inevitably be limited in one way or the other. The approach to ensuring that each right finds expression and the extent thereof was, in my view, clearly articulated by the Supreme Court of Appeal in the matter of Media Television Pty Limited versus Director of Public Prosecutions, Western Cape. And I think it's prudent that I quote what that court said. Where constitutional rights themselves have the potential to be mutually limiting, in that the full enjoyment of one necessarily curtails the full enjoyment of another and vice versa, a court must necessarily reconcile them. They cannot be reconciled by purporting to weigh the value of one right against the value of the other, and then preferring the right that is considered to be more valued and jettisoning the other, because all protected rights have equal value. They are rather to be reconciled by recognizing a limitation upon the exercise of one right to the extent that it is necessary to do so in order to accommodate the exercise of the other, or in some cases, by recognizing an appropriate limitation upon the exercise of both rights, according to what is required by the particular circumstances and within the constraints that are imposed by Section 36. I close quotes. It is to this test that I have employed. It is this test that I have employed in considering the applications and the rights asserted by the protagonists before me. My point of departure is to properly consider the objection by Pistorius to the relief sought by the applicants. In oral argument before me, I was directed to the different forms of coverage sought. What is clear, however, when one considers the opposing representations filed on behalf of Pistorius is that whilst the focal point of his opposition is directed at the live audio-visual coverage of the criminal proceedings, his opposition to the audio and still photographic coverage of the trial requires further attention. In my view, in terms of the approach suggested by the Supreme Court of Appeal in Midi, it is not open for me to look at the value of each right and disqualify one or the other. My task is to look at each right at stake and permit its enjoyment to achieve the objective for which it is asserted. In this regard, the freedom of expression right, which itself is not immune from limitation, goes a long way into complementing the open justice principle. When considering the freedom of expression right, insofar as it relates to the audio-visual request, in particular, the cautionary injunction that was mentioned by the Constitutional Court in the SABC NDPP matter, we must not lose sight of that cautionary statement. And I have, in this regard, decided to quote it in full. Before turning to the question of the order, we consider it helpful to set out some considerations which, in our view, need to be taken into account in the future when the question of televising court proceedings is raised. The time has come for courts to embrace the principle of open justice and all it implies. However, in our view, it should be borne in mind that the electronic media create some special difficulties for the principle of open justice. Broadcasting, whether by television or radio, has the potential accurate reflection of what actually happened. This is particularly dangerous given that visual and audio recordings can be edited in a manner that does not disclose the fact of editing. This distorting effect needs to be guarded against. It arises not so much from the presence of cameras and microphones interfering with the court proceedings themselves, but more dangerously, it may arise from the manner in which coverage can be manipulated, often unwittingly to produce communications which may undermine rather than support public education on the workings of the court and may also undermine the fairness of the trial. Such distortions are much more likely to arise from edited highlights packages than from full live broadcasts. I close quote. It is also instructive not to forget that the Constitutional Court itself mentioned that in exercising the power in terms of Section 173, especially to uphold the interests of justice, both accuracy and balance are necessary to ensure this. Furthermore, it is necessary to keep in mind that in the open democratic society envisaged by our Constitution, and in which the public have a right of access to the workings of the judicial system, the issue is not whether the electronic broadcast or print media should be allowed to cover proceedings, but how guarantees can be put in place to ensure that the public is indeed well informed about how the court functions when dealing with proceedings before them. I am not persuaded that the objection by Pistorius to the coverage of his pending criminal trial should be jettisoned to the extent he suggests. I have found merit in the argument on behalf of the applicants that acceding to the objection by Pistorius fully will perpetuate the situation that only a small segment of the community is able to be kept informed about what happens in courtrooms because of this minority's access to tools such as Twitter, for example. According to that argument, this will also perpetuate the reality that the community at large remains dependent for news on what happens in the courtroom from the summarized versions of the journalists and reporters who follow these proceedings. These summarized versions or accounts have, in my view, been correctly categorized as second-hand, liable to be inaccurate as they also depend on the understanding and views of the reporter or journalist covering the proceedings. My views to the objections raised by Pistorius find support in the open justice principle. Allowing the objections in their entirety will surely jettison the noble objectives of the principle of open justice when one takes cognizance of our development in the democratic path. At this day and age, I cannot countenance a stance that seeks to entrench the workings of the justice system away from the public domain. Court proceedings are in fact public, and this objective must be recognized. Our Constitution is underpinned by a number of values, and for purposes of this case, I refer to openness and accountability as found in Section 1D, which provides that the Republic of South Africa is one democratic state founded upon a number of values, including a multi-party system of democratic government to ensure accountability, responsiveness, and openness. In this regard, it is also important to take cognizance of the fact that Sections 34 and 35(3)(c) make it very clear that even criminal proceedings in this country are to be public. The basis for this is that courts of law exercise public power over citizens, and for this it is important that proceedings be open, as this encourages public understanding as well as accountability. I refer in this regard to what the Constitutional Court said in the matter of State versus Mamabulo. It is also worth our while to take cognizance of what the House of Lords has said in this regard in the matter of McCann-Turkington-Breen versus Times Newspapers Limited to the effect that, I quote, "In a modern, developed society, it is only a small minority of citizens who can participate directly in the discussions and decisions which shape the public life of that society. The majority cannot participate in the public life of their society if they are not alerted to and informed about matters which call or may call for consideration in action. It is very largely through the media that they will be so alerted and informed. The proper functioning of a modern participatory democracy requires that the media be free, active, professional, and inquiring." I close quotes. Clearly, therefore, the freedom of expression right as well as the open justice principle come into sharp focus in the current application and require appropriate treatment and accommodation regarding the final relief to be granted. In balancing the competing rights at stake, it is my view that the objection by Pistorius to the audio-visual recording of him and some of his witnesses should not be taken lightly. It was argued on his behalf forthrightly that the inhibitory effect of audio-visual recording equipment, as well as the knowledge and awareness thereof by himself as an accused person and by his witnesses, will be great when they give their evidence. These potential of a fair trial on the grounds spelled out in argument on his behalf. I am persuaded that there is merit in his fears and that of his witnesses that they may be disabled somewhat in giving evidence. I treat this situation similarly to how I've discussed the audiovisual request. On the other hand, however, audio coverage, in my view, does not carry the inhibitory or intrusive potential as the audiovisual form of coverage. In my view, whilst there may be no visual image of Pistorius and his witnesses when they testify, they should, however, be heard on radio. I have further considered the extensive interest that the pending criminal trial has evoked in the local and international communities, as well as media circles. It is, in my view, in the public interest that, within allowable limits, the goings-on during the trial be covered as I have come to decide, to ensure that a greater number of persons in the community who are unable to attend these proceedings are able to follow wherever they may be. Moreover, in a country like ours, local and international icon, I have taken judicial notice of the fact that part of the perception that I alluded to is to the fact that the justice system is still perceived as treating the rich and famous with kid gloves, whilst being harsh on the poor and vulnerable. Enabling a larger South African society to follow firsthand the criminal proceedings which involve a celebrity, so to speak, will go a long way into dispelling these negative and unfounded perceptions about the justice system, and will inform and educate society regarding the conduct of criminal proceedings. I must hasten to mention that the decision I have come to should be embraced with the objective I have spelled out in this judgment. I mentioned in this regard that the reason that I mention this for the reason that it has come to my attention that there are media houses that intend to establish so-called 24-hour channels dedicated to the trial only, and that panels of legal experts and, in certain instances, retired judges may be assembled to discuss and analyze the proceedings as they unfold. Because of these intentions, it behoves me to reiterate that there is only one court that will have the duty to analyze and pass judgment in this matter, and it is this court. The so-called trial by media inclinations cannot be in the interest of justice as required in this matter and have the potential to seriously undermine the court proceedings that will soon start. Despite the order that I have arrived at, it must be understood that the presiding judge over the criminal trial retains the media applicants or their authorized representatives are permitted to set up equipment in accordance with the specifications that I mentioned below to obtain a video and audio recording and or transmission of the permitted permitted portions, as indicated in this order, of the criminal trial of Oscar Pistorius under case number 13/25513. 2. The technical equipment shall comply with the following specifications. 3 cameras, as depicted in Annexure A, shall be installed in the courtroom where the trial is to take place at least 72 hours before the trial commences. The cameras shall be installed in locations in the courtroom which are as unobtrusive as possible, and so that the proceedings are not interfered with. The locations of the cameras shall be substantially in the areas broadcast and to give directions regarding the images to be broadcast to avoid extreme close-ups. I now deal with the portions of the trial that may be recorded and broadcast. In the first place, MultiChoice and Prime Media are permitted to broadcast the audio. Each of the cameras shall be controlled by one of the applicant's representatives, who will at all times remain behind the cameras while court is in process. The aforesaid cameras may not be moved while the court is in session, and no changes of lenses or film shall be permitted while the court is in session. No extreme close-up photographs of any witness, legal representative, the presiding judge, or any person in attendance at the trial shall be taken. Flash photographs shall not be permitted. No artificial lighting devices and no visible or audible lights or signal shall be permitted. No cabling for the cameras on the floor of the court shall be permitted. No identifying names, marks, logos, symbols may be used in any equipment or clothing worn by the representatives of the applicants. The applicants are permitted to take still photographs during the entire course of the trial, excluding the accused and his witnesses only when they testify, provided that witnesses, other than expect witnesses for the state or police officers or former police officers who testify at the trial, may object to being photographed while giving evidence, and if the presiding judge rules that such witness may not be photographed while giving evidence, the applicant shall refrain from doing so. Alternatively, may subject his or her consent to reasonable conditions, including that his face or her face be obscured in any photograph published, or that only wide-angle photographs of him or her are allowed, meaning photographs that include not only the witness but as much the physical surrounds of the courtroom as is technically possible. Notwithstanding the above, and in the event that it becomes apparent that the still photography is impeding or will impede a particular witness' right to privacy, dignity, or the accused's right to a fair trial, the court may, after hearing all interested parties, direct the cessation of photography. The applicants are to make available at no cost and in clean form with no logos the still photographs referred to above to any media organization requesting same. The court may, on good cause shown, withdraw, leave, or change the conditions I have mentioned. Furthermore, notwithstanding the above, the presiding judge shall retain a discretion to direct that in the event that it becomes apparent that the presence of the cameras or the recording and or transmitting and or broadcasting is impeding a particular witness's right to privacy, dignity, or the accused's right to a fair trial, MultiChoice and Prime Media and the print media will be directed to cease recording and or taking still photographs and or transmitting and or broadcasting the testimony. MultiChoice and print media are directed to make the feed from the authorized broadcast referred to above available free of charge to the applicants under case number 51545/13, that is the ETV applicants, and any other broadcaster in clean form that is free of any logos. There is no order as to costs. I hand down the judgment. Thank you. Court adjourns.
Well, live from the North Gauteng High Court, breaking news at 20 minutes after 12. The media application has just been approved. Pistorius' murder trial can be televised in part and with very strict conditions. The judge going on to also refer to the various other media houses regarding photography, that's still photography, and also various radio stations that will be picking this up. Judge Dustin Mlambo allowing the media application to be approved and to go ahead. Oscar Pistorius' trial will be live.
All right, to just fill you in on the kinds of conditions that media houses will have to adhere to in order for their continued broadcasts to continue from those courtrooms. 3 cameras, we understand, will have to be installed 72 hours before the proceedings begin. The cameras will, of course, have to be installed in an unobtrusive location. They will be remote controlled, so no cameraman will be allowed to man those cameras. There will be no close-ups allowed, and no recording will be allowed during breaks. So it will be strictly when court is in session. Furthermore, one quite important thing to remember, no lights are allowed.
Yeah, no, we always, I think a lot of people were expecting this, and many of the media houses had said that they are willing to, of course, go ahead with the sort of coverage, knowing there were going to be very strict conditions. I mean, Joanne, you touched on a few of them, but just in a nutshell, and there were so many of them, but let's just bring you up to speed on the others. No flash photography whatsoever allowed in court. No company logos. You often see the microphones. We saw a good example there in front of the judge. No logos on the microphones where witnesses are busy speaking. No extreme close-ups, you mentioned that, and no TV cables on the floor. So the judge very clear that it must not in any way impede on the proceedings taking place in the courtroom itself.
Right, we're going to bring you a little more on those details in just a while. Let's talk to Anton Harber-Caxton, Professor of Journalism at Wits University, and William Bird, Director of Media Monitoring Africa. And William, I'm going to bring you in here. Quite a tough decision here, the judge having to balance freedom of expression with the right to a fair trial, and having emphasized there no one right in the Constitution trumps the other.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lovely experience sitting and witnessing his ruling, actually, because it's not that often that you get to hear a judge in ordinary public discourse setting out how you have to try and balance competing rights. And I think he's done a lovely job of it, you know, with lots of quotes from different cases and making sure that we understand why he's come to the decision that he has. I think it's interesting that he's concerned about the impact of edited audiovisual images and how that may distort and potentially undermine the proceedings of the court, and yet he's allowed he's allowed for video recording of the entire proceedings to go ahead. So that, I think, is an interesting thing which we might need to kind of unpack. But in general terms, you know, I think he seems to have managed that particularly well with the conditions he's imposed.
Anton, let me put this to you. William, just picking up very briefly on the editing of the trial once it does start. As someone who has been around in journalism as long as you have, when it comes to, and this is a very good example, it's what we do, it's what radio stations will do, what newspapers will do. Obviously, you won't take everything when it comes to, as the judge said, packaging of a highlights package, I think he said. When people are watching at home and they see the various inserts going out, there's always going to be criticism that an organisation is leaving out certain parts. How does the media now go forward, knowing what the judge has said, and make it as balanced as possible?
Well, I think those are cautionary remarks about the dangers of editing, but editing has to happen. Yep. You can't always show everything. And in fact, editing is very helpful because it allows explanation, highlighting what's important, leaving out the dull, tedious stuff, and focusing in on what's important. But I think it's a warning sign that you have to, particularly in a trial, be balanced to carry all sides of the argument when you have witnesses, their cross-examination, and to make sure one does give as full a picture as possible.
I think it's worth noting, Joanne, as well, and William and Anton were listening to this as well, that Judge Mlambo was very clear on that the presiding judge, in this trial can at any point say, off with the cameras, off with the recordings, because they feel it's impeding on a witness as well. Overriding all the conditions that we've heard today, the judge still has the ultimate say.
I think that's quite important in this because, of course, he made it very clear that his first priority is to ensure that justice is carried out, and that's certainly before any other rights are considered here. But William, let me bring you in here again, and I'm very interested in these comments the judge made about this perception in our country that the justice system favours the rich and famous over the poor and vulnerable, and how broadcasting a trial of this nature will simply allay those fears, will it?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, the fact is that there's overwhelming interest precisely because of who is involved, and it's not as though this is a person of, just an ordinary citizen. This is a very public figure about a murder of a very public figure. So I don't think so. Also because we know that the reality is that he's able to afford an entire media team, an entire legal team, whereas the majority of poor people who go into these kinds of situations are not in a position to do so. So I don't think it'll do that, but what it will do fundamentally, and where I think it's very positive, is that this whole idea of open justice and the whole idea of people really understanding how our court processes work, it will help to demystify that and give any suggestion that somehow because he's wealthy, he walks in and he says, I don't really think I should be found guilty of this, and that everyone shakes hands and they all go home. I think that seeing the processes, seeing the due process being followed will certainly serve to make sure that people have a better understanding of how the justice system can and should work.
Anton, I think just as we begin to wrap up, just a final question to you, Anton, if we may. Is this a good thing for South African journalism to have allowed this to happen? Because this is a case that's going to be referred to in many more court cases, whatever they might be in the future. It will always be that Concord moment for us now that we will come back and refer to. Is this good for South African journalism?
I don't think there were any great surprises in the judgment. It went much as we might have expected. It does take the precedent a little bit further in applying what's happened in other kinds of cases to a large-scale criminal trial. I think it's good for journalism. I think it's good for justice in that it does favour the openness and the open scrutiny of the courts, but in a contained manner that tries to minimise any possible damage to justice.
All right. Anton Harber, thank you very much indeed. Caxton Professor of Journalism from Wits University, and William Bird, of course, I think our thanks to him as well, Director of Media Monitoring Africa. More now on this breaking news.
Right, we'll quickly recap our stories in just a short while, but let's just tell you that media houses at this hour have been granted permission to broadcast parts of the Oscar Pistorius trial live.
Well, here's some of the details we have. 3 remotely operated video cameras will be allowed inside the courtroom. The North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria handed down judgment on the matter just a few minutes ago. Judge Dunstan Mlambo said he considered the dangers of the trial video footage being manipulated while editing.
Now, 2 mounted stills cameras will also be permitted, but no flashes or any lighting will be allowed.
This application was brought by us, ENCA, MultiChoice and Eyewitness News. Defence lawyers opposed the action. We'll bring you more details on this breaking news when we come back. The media application for the Oscar Pistorius trial has been granted.
By dressing like an SAA pilot, Malusi Gigaba was telling the public that they will give a bailout to the failing national airline. Noma kanjani, Lindiwe Mazibuko rocked up in a wedding gown as a not-so-silent protest against more Zuma weddings. Science and Technologies Ngcobo wore a leopard print because he wants to remind us that, like leopards, politicians will never change their spots. Yeah, now you know. Now you know.
Catch Late Night News with Loiso Gola on ENCA.
An election is just months away, and this man has the biggest balancing act in the land. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan must promise South Africans that a better life for all isn't far away. He must also convince the markets that South Africa is watching its debt. Will taxes go up or down? And how will the government spend your money? Join us on the 26th of February at 2 as we unpack the numbers, bringing you insight into what it means for you, your business, and most importantly, your pocket. ENCA, you deserve to know more.
When you think of Africa, what comes to mind? Here, we remember our stories, toast our triumphs, lift our leaders. We own our future. See the real Africa, your Africa. Watch Africa 360 and see Africa like you've never seen it before.
Or their authorized representatives are permitted to set up equipment in accordance with the specifications that I mentioned below to obtain a video and audio recording and or transmission of the permitted portions as indicated in this order of the criminal trial of Oscar Pistorius.
Breaking news on ENCA at 12:30. In a landmark ruling, the North Gauteng High Court grants permission to televise parts of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial.
It's 12:30 here on ENCA, and this is our breaking news. Media houses have just been granted permission to broadcast parts of the Oscar Pistorius trial live.
There are many conditions. These are just some of them. 3 remotely operated video cameras will be allowed in the courtroom. The North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria handing down this judgment on the matter just a short while ago.
Well, Judge Dunstan Mlambo saying he considered the dangers of the trial video footage being manipulated while editing. 2 mounted stills cameras will also be permitted, but no flashes or any lighting will be allowed.
Well, this application was brought by us, ENCA, also MultiChoice and Eyewitness News. Defence lawyers opposed the action.
Well, this decision obviously being a massive victory for the media. Let's bring you some reaction from our group head of news, Patrick Conroy, who's with us in studio. Hi there, Patrick. How significant is this for media?
This is a big judgment because up until this point, if I just take you back over the last 10 years or so, it's been a battle to get TV cameras into court cases. If we go back to the Shabir Sheikh corruption trial, which was 10 years ago, we were only allowed on a very limited basis. And over the course of the last 10 years, we've been given greater and greater access to things like commissions of inquiry. We were allowed, our cameras were allowed in court when Julius Malema appeared before the Equality Court. And so what's happened over the last 10 years is that steadily that line has been moved. But we've never been allowed to cover witness testimony, expert witnesses and so forth. And yet you can do this live from the courtroom on Twitter. 6 years ago, Twitter didn't exist. 10 years ago, Facebook didn't exist. And yet television cameras were still not being allowed into courtrooms. And I've always said courtrooms are 19th, 18th century establishments. Television cameras are 20th century technology, and it's not allowed in the 21st century. And so I think what this is a recognition by the courts that you have to take broadcasting seriously in the modern communication age. And whether you like it or not, there will be live commentary in forms of social media on trials. Journalists will be able to sit in court and tweet in real time. And so effectively, the cat's out the bag anyway. And I think that what has happened in this instance is that we've reached a very good judgment in terms of the fact that there was a compromise between the media houses and the courts as to how we would approach the conundrum of witness testimony. The big difference here is that witnesses who are not experts, just eyewitnesses to the crime scene, people who may have arrived at Oscar Pistorius' house on the night of the shooting,
through audio,
are not trained to be in front of television news cameras. They may be traumatized by what they saw. And in this instance, they can object. And in fact, they will not appear on camera. And I think that's one of the key things that I think gave some comfort to the courts. The other thing is that expert witnesses, police officers, who may or may not have bungled the crime scene, experts giving testimony, who make a living out of their expert testimony, will be allowed on camera. And I think that is significant, and it will lead to greater understanding of our courts, because the fear that highlighted packages would distort what had happened and one wouldn't understand the context, I think fall away. With Twitter, how do you summarize a complex legal argument in 140 characters? You don't. And I think this is the recognition that the courts have come to.
I think I think it's worth noting as well that the judge went on to just to clarify they've allowed the broadcasting of the opening argument for the state and defence, the expert evidence which Patrick is referring to, the testimony of expert witnesses, in this case being the police, and all consenting state witnesses. The judge in the end, Joanne, as Patrick quite knows as well, has the overall say. If at any moment the judge decides they're not happy for whatever reason it might be, an infringement on these very strict conditions, they can shut the entire broadcast down for that period. But it seems as though, and Anton Harbour was talking about the behaviour of media, Patrick, as well. Do you think we're going to see what we saw during the bail application, or do you think because everyone's consolidated, it'll be different?
I think it's a good judgment in the fact that it's practical.
Yeah.
And it means that there are a limited number of cameras in court. This is how you apply them. And this is, everyone will get access to the feed. So there won't be a media scrum necessarily in the courtroom. Secondly, although, the judiciary is going to have to become media savvy very quickly. Judges are going to need to understand what's going on in the courts. They're going to need to be able to take not just notice of what's happening between the prosecution and the defense, but also what the ongoing impact is for the outside as a result of the media being given access. So I think our judges are going to require some training in this particular regard very soon. But a good judgment for democracy.
Let's talk about this judgment for the concept of open justice, the fact that the minority in our country doesn't have access to the same, the majority rather, doesn't have access to the same information, the same ideas that the minority does. What does the judgment mean for those people in this?
Well, I think it's excellent in the sense that you have huge radio penetration in South Africa. If you are watching us as you currently are on DSTV, well, that's a limited audience who have to pay a subscription every month to get access to this kind of news content. But because this is now universally available through a pool feed, it means any radio station can take it. It could be a community radio station, it could be a commercial radio station, it could be international broadcasters. And so I think there's greater access to what's going on in the court, and it's not just the privileged few with decoders who are able to see what's happening in our South African justice system.
All right, Patrick, thank you very much indeed. Our boss, Patrick Conroy, ENCA's Group Head of News. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with a lot more reaction to that breaking news you can see on your screen.
Life is about the decisions you make every day, like when you're shopping.
I want this jacket.
Eugene, do you want it or need it?
I want to need it.
Uh-huh.
And these?
You're good for those.
Okay.
Or like that unexpected car expense.
How am I going to pay for all of this?
Eugene, remember, you have a savings account for rainy days like this.
Like today.
Yeah, Bob.
Ah.
Or like buying a house.
Yeah, buying. I thought I was renting.
But renting means you're paying off someone else's bond instead of your own.
Bye-bye renting. Hello, home sweet home. I'll buy.
So that you can reward yourself for those decisions.
With cupcakes from my favorite coffee shop.
Or even owning the coffee shop.
And have cupcakes forever.
Exactly. Because when you're more savvy with your money, there's nothing in your life you can't achieve.
Like little fairies, moonwalking.
Make your savvy life happen. Visit any Nedbank today.
To recap our breaking news on the channel at this hour, media houses have been granted permission to broadcast parts of the Oscar Pistorius trial live.
That's right, there are conditions attached to it. This is just one of them. 3 remotely operated video cameras will be allowed in the courtroom. The North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria handing down this judgment on the matter just a short while ago.
Judge Dunstan Mlambo said he considered the dangers of the trial video footage being manipulated while editing. He's also allowed for the broadcasting of opening argument for the state and defence, as well as expert evidence, the testimony of police and all consenting state witnesses.
Another condition, no recording can take place while the court is not in session, and 2 mounted still cameras, now we talk about the photography element, will be permitted, but no flashes nor any artificial lighting will be allowed.
The application was brought by ENCA, MultiChoice and Eyewitness News. Defence lawyers, of course, opposed that action.
Let's continue our ongoing coverage of what many are saying is a groundbreaking ruling, particularly in South Africa. Let's get reaction from our reporters in the field. We go live now to Kathy Mokgatlana. She was in the court and she joins me from Pretoria. And Kathy, good day to you. It's certainly history in the making, I think, for South African journalism and media at large.
You're absolutely correct, Gareth. And what a victory it is for media houses. You know, listening to Judge Mlambo actually go through the ruling, you can tell it was a well thought out argument, and he really tried to balance all of the interests of the parties involved. But let's get a bit of reaction from what he had to say here this afternoon. I'm joined by Group News Editor for ENCA, Ben Said. Ben, firstly, what's your reaction to this? Obviously a positive outcome.
Positive outcome, stunning and unprecedented, I think, in terms of the media's access to the judicial system in South Africa. You know, we've been plugging away for years, trying to get more and more access to South African courtrooms to bring viewers around the country what happens inside our court processes. I thought that we might get audio of the trial, or certainly portions of the trial. I didn't think we would get as much television access as we have. So really, this was a surprise, but a pleasant one.
But in as much as it was a pleasant surprise, there are certain restrictions and conditions that the judge has spoken about. What does this mean for viewers? What can they expect to see on television?
Well, first of all, they're going to get an audio feed of the entire trial. So that's very much a step forward. We have not been allowed that in the past. What we have been allowed in the past have generally been opening arguments, closing arguments, judgments, sentencing. We're still going to get that on television, but we're getting more as well. We're getting pretty much all state witnesses. So we're talking about police investigators. We're talking about crime scene experts, forensics experts that the state will bring to try and prove that Oscar Pistorius was guilty of murder. Now, most of those experts will be allowed. Other state witnesses have the option to not appear on camera, but they will have to do so 24 hours beforehand in writing. So it's a little restrictive in that regard. It gives a little too, I think, to Oscar Pistorius' legal team. It says that all defense witnesses do not have to appear on camera. Remember, we'll still get audio, but they don't have to appear on camera. But of course, they may decide in the course of this trial that they do want to appear on camera for strategic reasons. So it's a very wide-ranging judgment and a very important one.
Now, Ben, this judgment also signals a new era for the judicial system. One of the things that the judge president spoke about was perceptions of the judiciary within the public at large. And how do you think that this now begins to change the relationship between the judiciary and the media?
Well, I mean, I think we've always thought that open access to our court system is important so that people can understand what goes on inside that court system. And, you know, the government has been talking for years about how it wants to open up courts to South Africans, get South Africans to understand what goes inside. And I think television access is a very important part of that. We at E-News and ETV have been plugging away for years at this. It started more than 10 years ago with the King Commission into cricket match fixing, Hansi Cronje on the stand. We've slowly chipped away, slowly got more access, slowly got our television cameras in for things like judgments and sentencing, but this is a great step forward. And I think it's going to be not only interesting for South Africans to see what goes on in a criminal trial, but very important, I think, for the justice system as well. And it's going to have to conduct itself, I think, very well in this instance.
And obviously with this opportunity, Ben, comes a lot of responsibility for the media in terms of actual coverage. How then are people going to carry this trial forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think at ENCA we're going to be fairly responsible. We're going to give you as much analysis as we can. But Judge Mlambo was very clear that he does not want to see media houses speculating on the guilt or innocence of Oscar Pistorius. He spoke about rumors that other media organizations are setting up panels, which may even include retired judges. Now, the court was very clear that it doesn't want to see that sort of thing, and that only it has the power to decide whether Oscar Pistorius is guilty or innocent. So it doesn't want to see the media doing that. And I think there is a responsibility now on the broadcast media to show the judiciary and the court system that it can handle a trial of this magnitude in a responsible way.
Well, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That was ENCA Group News Editor Ben Said. Back to you in studio, Gareth.
And that was our reporter, Kathy Mochaglana. Going to be a very interesting next few weeks. A reminder, the trial starts on March 3rd. It's worth noting as well. Many questions now being asked, is Oscar Pistorius going to appeal this broadcasting ruling? It's worth noting he is more than within his rights to do that. We have not received any word as yet if there's any objection to the breaking news you can see on your screen. We'll watch that for you closely.
Right, let's get back to the ruling itself right now. Judge Dunstan Mlambo saying earlier the request to broadcast the trial had presented a challenge for all parties concerned.
The matter brings into sharp focus the interface between the functioning of the criminal justice system on the one hand and the quest by the media to participate in that system on the other hand. This interface finds expression in a number of critical constitutional rights that are seemingly on a collision course with one another. These are the rights of an accused person and the prosecution to a fair trial on the one hand, and the freedom of expression rights of the media.
Well, Judge Mlambo has also outlined several very strict conditions regarding the broadcast of the trial.
The technical equipment shall comply with the following specifications. 3 cameras, as depicted in Annexure A, shall be installed in the courtroom where the trial is to take place at least 72 hours before the trial commences. The cameras shall be installed in locations in the courtroom which are as unobtrusive as possible, and so that the proceedings are not interfered with. The locations of the cameras shall be substantially in the areas of the courtroom indicated in Annexure B. The cameras shall be remotely controlled from a control room, and no camera personnel are permitted to be present in the courtroom to operate these cameras during the trial. The cameras must be preset to ensure that no extreme close-ups of any witnesses, legal representatives, the presiding judge, or any person in attendance at the trial takes place. The equipment is not permitted to record in any manner any confidential communication between legal representatives or between clients and their legal representatives, or any bench discussions between the judge and any lay assessors that may be appointed. The presiding judge shall specifically direct when recording should start and when it should stop. The equipment shall be deactivated so that no recording whatsoever can take place while the court is not in session, including any breaks such as lunch and tea breaks, and during time before the court is in session and after the judge has adjourned the trial at the end of each day. The cameras shall not be accompanied by any movie lights, flash attachments, or artificial lighting devices, and no visible or audible light or signal is permitted.
Right, we'll bring you more on that a little later on in our programme. In other stories, Eskom says the country's power supply is under severe pressure. It's again urged consumers to reduce their electricity usage just to keep the lights on. Chairman of the parastatal, Zola Tsotsi, briefed the media on the state of the country's electricity supply a few hours ago. It came days after Eskom declared a power emergency twice in less than a week. 4 of its generating units went down during planned maintenance. Tsotsi says the power utility will continue the maintenance, with the first stage of Modupi well on track. He's also made it clear that contracts with other African countries do not prejudice our domestic supply.
Okay, thank you very much. While Eskom and the key customers worked hard to prevent a system collapse last week, we need to get everyone, particularly our commercial and residential customers, to share in the load in future. We are not yet out of the woods. The power system remains tight as new generation capacity comes on stream. Our call to all South Africans to save electricity remains and is louder than ever before. Every South African has a role to play in conserving energy.
All their authorized representatives are permitted to set up equipment in accordance with the specifications that I mentioned below to obtain a video and audio recording and or transmission of the permitted portions as indicated in this order of the criminal trial of Oscar Pistorius.
If you just joined us, breaking news on ENCA. In a landmark ruling, the North Gauteng High Court grants permission to televise parts of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial. Let's remind you that trial is set to begin on March the 3rd. We'll bring you more on this with more analysis and reaction to that breaking news throughout this afternoon. Let's quickly take you to the Johannesburg Stock Exchange for a look at your markets. After that, we'll have your sport and a weather forecast.
For 20 years, the greatest creative minds have come to Cape Town to exchange ideas and spread the word. See their inspiration take form in an exclusive selection of the best in African creativity. On show and for sale at Design Indaba Expo.
At only 14, her own father forced her to quit school and look for a job. It turned Angelique du Toit's life upside down and pushed her to try and commit suicide. But this remarkable woman is today a celebrated author, speaker, and sits on the board of a multinational company. Later, see how you can turn your child into a maths genius. Against all odds, with me, Mphola Gaje, on ENCA.
Welcome back. Good afternoon. Let's start with some Absa Premiership football. 3 of the top 4 strut their stuff tonight. Mamelodi Sundowns will continue their mission to catch Kaizer Chiefs. They have to get past 7th place Orlando Pirates at Loftus. The Buccaneers were beaten by Downs earlier this month. Hlompo Kekana's long-range strike was the highlight of that match. Pito Mosimane's Chargers can go within 6 points of leaders Chiefs with a victory. 3rd place SuperSport United visit Bidvest Stadium in the other match. A slip-up by the Brazilians will give Matsatsanta a chance of stealing 2nd spot. The first leg of the Champions League round of 16 continue this evening. English champions Manchester United travel to Greece to do battle with Olympiacos, while Zenit St. Petersburg hosts Jurgen Klopp's Dortmund.
David Moyes has left defenders Phil Jones and Johnny Evans in Manchester as the squad travels to Greece to take on Olympiacos. Both defenders have been unable to recover in time since picking up knocks in the 2-2 draw against Stoke City on February 1st. The 3-time champions of the continental competition come into the round of 16 without a loss, having qualified top of Group A. The manager has a lot to be excited about up front, with both star strikers fit and ready for the clash.
They're both vital to a lot of the things we do. They're both excellent players. Our record with them is far better than our record without them, that's for sure. And I think both of them had an injury. Robin's certainly much longer than Wayne. And I think they've both got themselves back into really good shape. And both goal scorers and scoring goals, which is great for us. And that's why they are top players. They score in the big games and they make the big moments.
On the other side of Europe, last season's beaten finalists Borussia Dortmund travelled to the snowy city of St. Petersburg in search of an away win. The Germans have scored more than twice the goals Zenit have in this campaign, a statistic typical of Jurgen Klopp's aggressive approach. Zenit St. Petersburg will be looking to better their best Champions League performance by reaching the quarter-finals.
The 2013 Sunshine Tour Players Awards were held in Pretoria last night. Dylan Fratelli won the Bobby Locke Trophy for Rookie of the Year. Ulrich van den Berg snapped up the Gary Player Trophy for the player with the best stroke average, while Darren Frechard clinched the Players Player of the Year award.
It's a great honour to get Players Player of the Season. It's you know, we go out there, we practice our butts off, and we're out there, all of us players together each week, trying to beat each other, and you know, for the players to nominate me is a great honour. Yeah.
We have three amazing trophies that go back to the Sid Bruce, who was a great South African player, Bobby Locke and Gary Player. Now those three awards were issued tonight, plus we have an award which we gave to the Rookie of the Year, and we gave an award to the winner of the Big Easy Tour. The special award we gave tonight is called the Commissioner's Award, which is, goes to a player who excelled himself in everything else but just golf. A player who created respect from his peers, a player who really played the game, worked hard with the sponsors, worked hard with our partners, and worked hard with the staff, worked hard with everybody.
Well, that's your sport for now. It's back to Joanne and Gareth.
Thanks very much for all of that, Carmen. Just before we leave you, of course, Newsday will have your headlines at the top of the hour, but we just want to recap the breaking news we're bringing you on the channel at this hour.
Well, media houses, they've been granted permission to broadcast part of the Oscar Pistorius trial live. 3 remotely operated video cameras will be allowed in the courtroom. It's one of the conditions.
Now, the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria handed down this judgment a short while ago. Judge Dunstan Mlambo saying he considered the dangers of the trial video footage being manipulated while editing.
The judge has also allowed for the broadcasting of opening arguments for the state and defence, as well as expert evidence, the testimony of police and all consenting state witnesses.
Importantly, no recording can take place while the court is not in session. 2 mounted stills cameras will also be permitted, but no flashes or any lighting will be allowed.
Well, the application was brought by us, ENCA, MultiChoice and also Eyewitness News. Defence lawyers opposed the action.
The media application to televise Oscar Pistorius' murder trial has been approved.
Eskom admits its supply is under pressure and again urges consumers to reduce consumption.
And 2 Soweto girls murdered in a suspected satanic killing have been laid to rest. It's 1 o'clock. This is Newsday on ENCA. A very good afternoon to you. I'm Andrew Barnes.
And I'm Bhavna Singh. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're with you until 3:30.
It is breaking news that leads this lunchtime. Media houses being granted permission to broadcast parts of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial live. 3 remotely operated cameras are to be allowed in the courtroom.
The North Gauteng High Court handed down judgment on the matter a short while ago. Judge Dunstan Mlambo said he did consider the dangers of the trial footage being manipulated while editing. The judge has allowed for the broadcasting of opening argument for the state and defence, as well as expert evidence, the testimony of police and all consenting state witnesses. No recording can take place while the court is not in session.
2 mounted stills cameras will also be permitted, but no flash photography or any artificial lighting will be allowed. The application was brought by ENCA, MultiChoice and Eyewitness News. Well, at court for us today, ENCA's Kathy Motlatlana. Kathy, the application being approved, the televised trial is to go ahead in part. Can you explain that?
Well, good afternoon, Andrew. What an absolute victory it is for media houses. You know, for the first time ever, there will actually be video and visual recordings of what is going to be taking place during the trial. Now, of course, this judgment also comes with certain restrictions and conditions that Judge Mlambo has put in place for the protection not only of witnesses, which was an issue raised by Oscar's lawyers, but also to ensure that nobody is prejudiced during the duration of this entire trial. And so what we're going to see happening is that portions of what is happening in court will be allowed to be broadcast on television, while audio recording is going to be allowed throughout the entire proceedings.
Oscar Pistorius' legal team can't be too happy.
Well, absolutely not. You know, from the beginning, they've opposed this application, saying that it would mean an unfair trial, not only for their client, but that he would also simultaneously undergoing a trial by the public and a trial by the media. But the judge, in his considerations, you know, paying, again, very close attention to detail where the opposition to this application was concerned, he says that he believes, in fact, that by allowing cameras inside court, this will expose processes of the judicial system to the South African audience at large, and of course to an international audience. He's also hoping that part of what it will do is dispel myths around access to justice, particularly where notorious or celebrity figures are concerned. He says that there's a perception in South Africa that justice is imposed on poor people, whereas the rich seemingly can get away with anything. And he believes that by allowing people to actually see what happens in courtrooms, part of these myths and perceptions in public may actually be dealt with.
So the trial of the century is all set to go come Monday morning.
Well, at this stage, it looks absolutely set to go. Obviously, the work now begins for media houses, particularly in terms of considering what exactly these restrictions are, what they mean, where these cameras are going to be mounted. You can imagine, Andrew, there's an expectation that 300 journalists have already applied for accreditation to cover this trial. At this stage, 80 of them are going to be allowed inside the courtroom. So naturally, it was going to be a media frenzy. And I think, you know, by putting in all these restrictions, the judge to some extent at least limits any kind of chaos from taking place inside court. Of course, his preference or his priority being that everything that takes place within the courtroom takes place without disruption, and that nobody is actually prejudiced by how proceedings are run. And so I think from here on, obviously everybody's planning how exactly they're going to be covering this trial. But again, cautioning the media, Andrew, against how they're going to be reporting on this, calling for not only responsible reporting but also accurate reporting. And he's also cautioned against, the type of analysis during the trial that could find Oscar guilty or innocent even before he's had his full day in court.
Kathy Matatlana at the North Gauteng High Court for us. And of course, we will bring you rolling coverage of what's being dubbed the trial of the century from Monday morning.
Other news this afternoon, Eskom says that the country's power supply is under severe pressure. It's again urged consumers to reduce their usage.
Chairman of the parastatal, Zola Sotsi, briefed the media on the state of the country's electricity supply this morning. It comes just days after Eskom declared a power emergency twice in less than a week. 4 of its generating units are down during planned maintenance. Sotsi says the power utility will continue that maintenance, with the first stage of Medupi well on track.
He has also made it clear that contracts with other African countries do not affect domestic supply.
Okay, thank you very much. While Eskom and key customers worked hard to prevent a system collapse last week, we need to get everyone, particularly our commercial and residential customers, to share in the load in future. We are not yet out of the woods. The power system remains tight as new generation capacity comes on stream. Our call to all South Africans to save electricity remains and is louder than ever before. Every South African has a role to play in conserving energy.
The 2 Soweto girls murdered in a suspected ritual killing have been laid to rest. Several hundred people attended the funeral at Dobsonville Stadium.
The bodies of 15-year-old Twaita Ratazwayo and 14-year-old Tandeka Mokanetsi were found in Dobsonville last Wednesday. 2 of their schoolmates appeared in court again yesterday. The matter was postponed to tomorrow for further investigation. Police say more arrests could be made.
The investigation is going well. I spoke to the investigating officers. The investigating officers said they're still busy, obtaining some witness statements. And at this stage, they're also not excluding the possibility that more arrests might happen.
Western Cape government officials set to meet police today to try to find a permanent solution to ongoing gang battles in Manenberg.
Members of the Manenberg Teachers Steering Committee successfully secured an interim High Court order last week ordering police to patrol 5 schools in the area. Pupils and teachers are caught in the crossfire almost daily. Teachers and safety volunteers have been too afraid to speak to the media for fear of victimization by gangs.
They feel education authorities have done little to keep them safe. The Western Cape Education Department, though, says it is exercising all the power it can to ensure people's safety. A quick look now at those lunchtime markets.
Winnie Madikizela Mandela has distanced herself from the upcoming movie about her life.
In a statement, Madikizela Mandela says she approached the producers of the movie to make sure the truth is reflected, but she says her calls fell on deaf ears. She says unlike Long Walk to Freedom, this film is based on unauthorized biography. Producers did not consult her or her family. She has also rejected media claims that she had a problem with the international artists that were cast in the movie.
Comrade Nelson Mandela.
When Newsday continues, thousands gather on Kiev's Independence Square to mourn those killed in the recent violent protests.
Could there be a better way to retire? The neighbors are friendly. The sun is my alarm clock. Old Mutual let me experience what my dream retirement would look like. Owning my own game lodge. 40 years before it happens.
Everybody has dreams. Let us help you plan for yours from today.
20 years into democracy, South Africa still faces major social challenges. The road to success is still under construction. In 2012, government unearthed its plan to tackle the country's infrastructure deficit. From roads and railways to homes, hospitals, ports and power plants, all in a bid to unlock mineral resources and connect the people to the main economic artery. But has a proper foundation been laid? Join us as we investigate the challenges faced in building South Africa. ENCA, know more about your world.
When you think of Africa, what comes to mind? Here, we remember our stories, toast our triumphs, lift our leaders. We own our future. See the real Africa, your Africa. Watch Africa 360 and see Africa like you've never seen it before.
An election is just months away, and this man has the biggest balancing act in the land. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan must promise South Africans that a better life for all isn't far away. He must also convince the markets that South Africa is watching its debt. Will taxes go up or down? And how will the government spend your money? Join us on the 26th of February at 2 as we unpack the numbers, bringing you insight into what it means for you, your business, and most importantly, your pocket. ENCA, you deserve to know more.
20 years into democracy, South Africa still faces major social challenges. The road to success is still under construction. In 2012, government unearthed its plan to tackle the country's infrastructure deficit. From roads and railways to homes, hospitals, ports and power plants, all in a bid to unlock mineral resources and connect the people to the main economic artery. But has a proper foundation been laid? Join us as we investigate the challenges faced in building South Africa. ENCA, know more about your world.
Relations with Uganda.
The move is in response to the signing of new anti-gay legislation, President Yoweri Museveni signing the controversial bill into law just yesterday.
It allows courts to sentence people who are found guilty of homosexual acts to life in prison. Anyone failing to report someone for breaking the new law can also be charged. The move has drawn widespread criticism from around the world. Gay rights activists in Uganda are planning a court challenge.
As President Obama has said, this law is more than an affront and a danger to the gay community in Uganda. It reflects poorly on the country's commitment to protecting the human rights of its people and will undermine public health, including efforts to fight HIV/AIDS. We will continue to urge the government of Uganda to repeal this abhorrent law and to advocate for the protection of the universal human rights of LGBT persons in Uganda and around the world. What I can tell you about steps the United States might take in response is that we are undertaking a review of our relationship with Uganda in light of this decision.
Ukraine's interim leadership is hoping to form a unity government by Thursday. A vote was to take place today, but interim President Alexander Turkhanov delayed the process for further consultation.
Ukrainians, in the meantime, are mourning those who've died in the recent protests. Kiev's streets are littered with flowers and candles now that the violence is over. Fatal clashes around Independence Square left 80 people dead and more than 800 others wounded. Ousted President Viktor Yanukovych is still in hiding. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton has arrived in Kiev to discuss measures to improve the country's ailing economy.
Tensions, meanwhile, continue to simmer in Venezuela.
Protesters have been setting up barricades in the streets despite calls from the opposition to rein themselves in. The government of Nicolas Maduro, Hugo Chávez's successor, has been accused of orchestrating a violent crackdown on the opposition. At least 12 people have been killed in recent days.
Traffic slowed to a crawl around the capital. Many people stayed at home as protesters burnt trash and piled debris along main roads. Opposition leader Enrique Caprioles has called on protesters to keep demonstrations peaceful. He was invited to meet President Maduro as part of a gathering that could open up communications between the two sides. But it may not be able to stem the nearly 2 weeks of street violence. Caprioles and other opposition figures are demanding that the government release imprisoned protest leader Leopoldo Lopez and about a dozen jailed student protesters. The US has meanwhile called for more dialogue between the parties.
Rather than trying to distract from its own failings by making up false accusations against the United States, which the government there has, the Venezuelan government ought to focus on addressing the legitimate grievances of the Venezuelan people.
The opposition also wants Maduro to disarm pro-government gangs. National issues ranging from crime to shortages of basic food products.
Just gone a quarter past the hour. These are your headlines. Breaking news that leads this afternoon. The media application to televise Oscar Pistorius' murder trial has been approved.
Eskom admits its supply is under pressure and again urges consumers to reduce consumption.
Thank you.
And 2 Soweto girls murdered in a suspected satanic killing have been laid to rest. Your latest sports news after the break here on Newsday. Stay with us.
Oh, you guys, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate this.
Just wanna thank you. I'm very grateful. Much love.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Yep, they said it. Thank you for letting them entertain you, for sharing their highs and lows, and for giving them a place to call home. And from us, thank you for being a DSTV customer.
Thanks for the inspiration. Thanks for everything. You rock.
So I want to thank you.
At only 14, her own father forced her to quit school and look for a job. It turned Angelique du Toit's life upside down and pushed her to try and commit suicide. But this remarkable woman is today a celebrated author, speaker, and sits on the board of a multinational company. Later, see how you can turn your child into a maths genius. Against all odds with me, Mphola Gaje, on ENCA.
This week on Tech Report, keep your plants healthy and fed, even if you have black thumbs. Get access to free Wi-Fi. Make sure your stuff is recoverable if it's stolen. Get some help on difficult decisions and find out all about Germany's secret winter sport weapon. That's Tech Report only on ENCA.
This week on Movers and Shakers, eccentric and controversial essay artist B.Z. Bailey talks to us about identity, Andy Warhol, and the contemporary art scene.
I just try to create beauty. There's also a very strong surreal element to my work.
He's a storyteller, and his work is also very free.
The experience of meeting Warhol gave me also a simple philosophy. Famous artists sell their work for lots of money.
That's Movers and Shakers, living inspiration, only on ENCA.
When you think of Africa, what comes to mind? Here, we remember our stories. Toast our triumphs. Lift our leaders. We own our future. See the real Africa, your Africa. Watch Africa 360 and see Africa like you've never seen it before.
You're watching Newsday Sport. Good afternoon. South Africa will go into the third and final test against Australia, brimming with confidence. Sunday's commanding 231-run series levelling victory over the Baggy Greens has seen 4 players improve their ratings on the latest ICC player rankings for batsmen. Hashim Amla moved up to second, while man of the match JP Duminy leapfrogged 20 places to 45th. Captain Graham Smith has hailed Amla for his superb comeback following a frustrating opening test.
You know, I think it's about knowing as a team the type of people you want involved, the type of quality that you want in that environment, and he's certainly one of those. And, you know, we had a long chat in between inningses, and, you know, so it really meant a lot to all of us to see him just respond, you know, because he's been a prolific run scorer for us for a period of time, and it was great to see Hash bounce back and from a small little thing. And I think within the team, no one ever questions his ability and what he can produce for us.
I think naturally most people sort of put that pressure on oneself. I'm no different. You know, I pride myself on my performances, and especially from a South African point of view, you know, you want to put in big performances for the team and contribute. So it's been a long time coming for me. I've always wanted to perform at this level, especially Test cricket, and it's great to put in a man of the match performance.
To ABSA Premiership football news, 3 of the top 4 teams strut their stuff tonight. Mamelodi Sundowns will continue their mission to catch Kaizer Chiefs. They have to get past 7th placed Orlando Pirates at Loftus. The Buccaneers were beaten by Downs earlier this month. Hlophe Kekane's long-range strike was the highlight of that match. Pitso Mosemane's Chargers can go within 6 points of leaders Chiefs with a win. Third place SuperSport United visit Bidvest Stadium on the other match. A slip-up by the Brazilians will give Mansansa a chance of stealing second spot. The first legs of the Champions League round of 16 continue this evening. English champions Manchester United travel to Greece to do battle with Olympiacos, while Zenit St. Petersburg host German giants Dortmund.
David Moyes has left defenders Phil Jones and Johnny Evans in Manchester as the squad travels to Greece to take on Olympiacos. Both defenders have been unable to recover in time since picking up knocks in the 2-2 draw against Stoke City on February 1st. The 3-time champions of the continental competition come into the round of 16 without a loss, having qualified top of Group A. The manager has a lot to be excited about up front, with both star strikers fit and ready for the clash.
They're both vital to a lot of the things we do. They're both excellent players. You know, our record with them is far better than our record without them, that's for sure. And I think both of them had an injury. You know, Robin's certainly much longer than Wayne, and I think they've both got themselves back into really good shape. And you know, both goal scorers and scoring goals, which is great for us. And you know, that's why they are top players. They score in the big games and they make the big moments.
On the other side of Europe, last season's beaten finalists Borussia Dortmund travelled to the snowy city of St. Petersburg in search of an away win. The Germans have scored more than twice the goals Zenit have in this campaign, a statistic typical of Jurgen Klopp's aggressive approach. Zenit St. Petersburg will be looking to better their best Champions League performance by reaching the quarter-finals.
Manchester United are overwhelming favourites in their last 16 UEFA Champions League clash against Olympiacos. The English Giants have never lost to Greek opposition in a European tie. However, manager David Moyes is under no illusions that his side will face a stern test tonight away from home.
I see it as an opportunity to try and win a competition. We're in the competition, we have to try and get as far as we possibly can and win it if possible. But the first thing we've got to do is get through the tie, this 2-legged tie. And it'll be a difficult game for us, but one that I think we're all looking forward to.
Boxing news now. Floyd Mayweather has announced his opponent for his next bout. The American superstar will be fighting Argentina's Marcos Maidana in May. Mayweather announced the news on social media. The 37-year-old will put his WBC welterweight title on the line on the 3rd of May, but the venue for the eagerly anticipated bout hasn't been confirmed. Mayweather, who has won all 45 of his professional fights, will face an Argentinian who comes off an impressive points decision win in December against Adrian Broner. To hockey news, the South African men's team must win to keep the series against Argentina alive. They take on the hosts in the 3rd and 5th tests in Mar del Plata this evening. South Africa lost their first match 6-0 on the weekend and then 4-2 last night.
Yeah, I think the first test match was a bit of a slow start. I mean, we just got off the plane the day before, so I think we couldn't expect too much. Of course, this is a training phase for us. Last night it was a massive improvement. I mean, we've really gone back to the drawing board and had a look at the video clips and see where we could improve on. And I think if you take from the first test to the second test match, I think there's a lot of boxes that we ticked last night. I think small mistakes has cost us 1 or 2 maybe soft goals that we just need to go back and make sure that we fix all of that for the 3rd test match.
And that's the sports news for now. Let's go to your weather with Louis.
Hello again and welcome back to the Weather Centre. We're expecting it to become quite stormy over in Mpumalanga later on today with a chance of heavy rainfall, while gusty winds have been forecast along KwaZulu-Natal's coastline. Tomorrow is still expected to bring some very high temperatures to the Northern and Western Cape. Now, a low pressure system has popped off the Eastern Cape coastline overnight, and that's located just to the east of the country. It's helping to pull down moisture over the eastern interior. That's already brought a few showers to Gauteng early in the day, and we've also had showers to the south of that low pressure system along the Garden Route coastline, while over the western interior it's been a mainly clear start to the day. Now, the South African Weather Service continues to issue a warning for a region of high fire danger over the west coast and the adjacent interior today. And they've also issued a watch for the likelihood of heavy rainfall later on over the eastern parts of Mpumalanga and the northern interior of KwaZulu-Natal, perhaps even reaching the coastline. Now, that low continues to move away from South Africa for the rest of today, still pushing in moist air along that east coast where we're likely to see further rain. Thunder showers for Gauteng as well as into Limpopo and Mpumalanga and into the northwest province, while in the western parts of the country it's going to be a mainly clear and dry afternoon. Tomorrow brings with it a bit of morning rain along the east coast, fairly cloudy start to the day over those areas, mainly cloudy over Limpopo and Mpumalanga with a very good chance of thunder showers again. Over the west, on the other hand, dry weather will dominate and we're expecting a much hotter day, especially near the west coast. Today's rainfall probabilities indicating scattered to widespread showers and thunder showers extending from Limpopo towards Mpumalanga and clipping the northern parts of Gauteng. South of this, isolated thunder showers will dominate, including for Mahikeng and towards Bethlehem in the Free State. Rain along the east coast and the adjacent interior, and a few showers still lingering along the Garden Route coastline, but those are starting to clear. Southwesterly winds get up to 40 kilometers per hour for both Durban and Richards Bay this afternoon, and that southeaster is gradually starting to ease off around the Cape Peninsula. Temperatures reach the mid to upper 20s over the Eastern Cape today. We're expecting similar temperatures into Gauteng, where Johannesburg reaches a maximum of 26, 29 for Polokwane and Mbombela, as well as for Pretoria, while over the Northern Cape we're expecting another very hot day, and Vredendal in the Western Cape reaches a high of 40 degrees. And don't forget that tomorrow will bring even higher temperatures to the region. Overnight lows indicating a fairly cool evening over the central and eastern parts of South Africa, lower teens for many places, while near the western coastline it's going to be an especially warm night, temperatures in the mid to lower 20s. Looking ahead to tomorrow afternoon, upper 30s for Springbok as well as for Cape Town, isolated thunder showers for Gauteng. Pretoria gets to 29 degrees once again, and on Thursday it remains mainly dry over the western parts of the country and temperatures rise across the south coast for George and Port Elizabeth.
Newsday continues on ENCA after the break. Stay with us.
For our ETV viewers, though, that's it for today. We're back with you tomorrow afternoon at 1. We'll see you then.
"20 years into democracy, South Africa still faces major social challenges. The road to success is still under construction. In 2012, government unearthed its plan to tackle the country's infrastructure deficit. From roads and railways to homes, hospitals, ports and power plants, all in a bid to unlock mineral resources and connect the people to the main economic artery. But has a proper foundation been laid? Join us as we investigate the challenges faced in building South Africa. ENCA, know more about your world.
An election is just months away, and this man has the biggest balancing act in the land. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan must promise South Africans that a better life for all isn't far away. He must also convince the markets that South Africa is watching its debt. Will taxes go up or down? And how will the government spend your money? Join us on the 26th of February at 2 as we unpack the numbers, bringing you insight into what it means for you, your business, and most importantly, your pocket. ENCA, you deserve to know more.
The media application to televise Oscar Pistorius' murder trial has been approved.
Eskom admits its supply is under pressure and again urges consumers to reduce consumption.
And 2 Soweto girls murdered in a suspected satanic killing have been laid to rest. You're watching Newsday on ENCA. A very good afternoon to you.
International news and a look at the weather coming up. But first, it's breaking news.
Media houses have been granted permission to broadcast parts of the Oscar Pistorius murder trial live. 3 remotely operated cameras will be allowed into the courtroom.
The North Gauteng High Court handed down judgment on the matter a short while ago. Judge Dunstan Mlambo saying he did consider the dangers of the trial footage being manipulated while editing. The judge has allowed for the broadcasting of opening arguments for the state and defence, as well as expert evidence, the testimony of police, and all consenting state witnesses. No recording can take place while the court is not in session.
2 mounted stills cameras will also be permitted, but no flash photography or any artificial lighting will be allowed. The application was brought by ENCA, MultiChoice and Eyewitness News.
For some analysis on this story, on the line, criminal law attorney William Booth. William, good afternoon to you. What's your take on the ruling?
Afternoon. I think, as far as I'm concerned, pretty much what I expected. I think what the judge did was sort of balance the rights of Mr. Pistorius against the rights of the public to know what is going on. And also, should there be any witness that doesn't wish to be televised, that person has a choice in the matter. So, I think it follows the trend internationally that cases are being televised, but one has to kind of balance the whole thing up and make a decision that does not affect the rights of an accused person to a fair trial. I think the question that's often asked is, well, because it's going to be televised, how is that going to impact on Mr. Pistorius? And how would it impact on him if he were, when he testifies, to be shown up on television cameras throughout the world? And I think, he may then refuse to be seen on television and say, look, I don't wish to be, it's going to impact and it's prejudicial to me testifying. I feel uncomfortable about it, and I feel that my rights to a fair trial are going to be infringed.
The fact that this ruling has been made today makes this trial pretty historic. This is a precedent-setting ruling, isn't it?
It is pretty much so. There's certain cases in South Africa that have been televised, parts of the case, for example, judgment. And in some instances, judges have allowed photographs to be taken before and after the court hearing. But I think this is probably a first. But it still, in my mind, seems to balance the rights of an accused to a fair trial against everybody knowing what is going on. And it has such massive international impact that I think he had to sort of walk a fine line. Because I think we need to know. I mean, the media has a role to play, and the public out there needs to know what happens in court. Many people are not aware of what takes place daily in our courts. I mean, they can't all come along and sit in court. So it is pretty historic, I believe, certainly as far as South Africa is concerned. I mean, in the United States of America, this thing probably happens on a daily basis.
What do you make of Oscar's legal team and this point about state witnesses being able to watch each other give evidence on TV?
Well, that is something that I think the court needs to consider. Look, at the end of the day, his legal team might argue on what has happened in court and how things have been televised, and other people watching and telling other people what previous witnesses have said, that does affect his right to a fair trial. So at any time, he can lodge an objection, possibly even before the trial starts, because this ruling can certainly, as far as I'm concerned, be dealt with in court if his legal team feels it's impacting on his right to a fair trial. And, normally one doesn't know what the next witness is going to come and say. But if you're sitting and watching the television, or certainly even if you're not, people are telling you what they viewed on television, that could impact on the on the whole approach to the case, and witnesses are aware of what other witnesses are going to say. So those are objections that I certainly strongly believe that his legal team will take as the case goes along.
Will the fact that the trial is to be televised change either of the team's strategies in court?
Well, difficult question to answer. Maybe they're going to dress differently than the way they would have if it wasn't being televised. But I don't think it would. Obviously they've worked out a strategy as to how they're going to deal with the matter. The state is going to be looking at how it's going to be presenting its evidence, and obviously Pistorius' legal team is going to look at how they're going to cross-examine evidence. But I think it does still leave the way open for objections to be lodged during the trial. And we don't have a jury trial here. I mean, if this was a jury trial, and it was in the United States of America or in the United Kingdom, then I think the fact that it's being televised and people are talking to each other could have a major impact on the jury. But hang on, the judge is also possibly watching television and listening to what has been said. So even though seemingly any judge is objective, I suppose these are things that could have a subjective impact on any judge hearing the matter. Whether you like it or not, judges read the newspapers and they also watch television.
Well, millions of others will as this trial gets underway on Monday. William Booth, thanks for your time and your views. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
More immediate news. Eskom says that the country's power supply is under severe pressure, and it's again urged consumers to reduce usage.
Chairman of the parastatal, Zola Sotsi, briefed the media on the state of the country's electricity supply this morning. It comes just days after Eskom declared a power emergency twice in less than a week.
Four of its generating units went down during planned maintenance, and Sotsi says that the power utility will continue the maintenance, with the first stage of Medupi well on track. He also made it clear that contracts with other African countries do not affect domestic supply.
Okay, thank you very much. Eskom and key customers worked hard to prevent a system collapse last week. We need to get everyone, particularly our commercial and residential customers, to share in the load in future. We are not yet out of the woods. The power system remains tight as new generation capacity comes on stream. Our call to all South Africans to save electricity remains and is louder than ever before. Every South African has a role to play in conserving energy.
The two Soweto girls murdered in a suspected ritual killing have been laid to rest. Several hundred people attended the funeral at Dobsonville Stadium.
The bodies of 15-year-old Kwaita Ratazwayo and 14-year-old Tandeka Mokanetsi were found in Dobsonville last Wednesday. Two of their schoolmates appeared in court again yesterday. The matter was postponed to tomorrow for further investigation. Police say more arrests could be made.
The investigation is going well. I spoke to the investigating officers. The investigating officers said they're still busy, obtaining some witness statements. And at this stage, they're also not excluding the possibility that more arrests might happen.
Time now for a look at your weather. Here's Louis.
Hello again and welcome back to the Weather Centre. We're expecting it to become quite stormy over in Mpumalanga later on today with a chance of heavy rainfall, while gusty winds have been forecast along KwaZulu-Natal's coastline. Tomorrow is still expected to bring some very high temperatures to the Northern and Western Cape. Now, a low pressure system has popped off the Eastern Cape coastline overnight, and that's located just to the east of the country. It's helping to pull down moisture over the eastern interior. That's already brought a few showers to Gauteng early in the day, and we've also had showers to the south of that low pressure system along the Garden Route coastline, while over the western interior it's been a mainly clear start to the day. Now, the South African Weather Service continues to issue a warning for a region of high fire danger over the west coast and the adjacent interior today. And they've also issued a watch for the likelihood of heavy rainfall later on over the eastern parts of Mpumalanga and the northern interior of KwaZulu-Natal, perhaps even reaching the coastline. Now, that low continues to move away from South Africa for the rest of today, still pushing in moist air along that east coast where we're likely to see further rain. Thunder showers for Gauteng as well as into Limpopo and Mpumalanga and into the northwest province, while in the western parts of the country it's going to be a mainly clear and dry afternoon. Tomorrow brings with it a bit of morning rain along the east coast, fairly cloudy start to the day over those areas, mainly cloudy over Limpopo and Mpumalanga with a very good chance of thunder showers again. Over the west, on the other hand, dry weather will dominate and we're expecting a much hotter day, especially near the west coast. Today's rainfall probabilities indicating scattered to widespread showers and thunder showers extending from Limpopo towards Mpumalanga and clipping the northern parts of Gauteng. South of this, isolated thunder showers will dominate, including for Mahikeng and towards Bethlehem in the Free State. Rain along the east coast and the adjacent interior, and a few showers still lingering along the Garden Route coastline, but those are starting to clear. Southwesterly winds get up to 40 kilometers per hour for both Durban and Richards Bay this afternoon, and that southeaster is gradually starting to ease off around the Cape Peninsula. Temperatures reach the mid to upper 20s over the Eastern Cape today. We're expecting similar temperatures into Gauteng, where Johannesburg reaches a maximum of 26, 29 for Polokwane and Mbombela, as well as for Pretoria, while over the Northern Cape we're expecting another very hot day, and Vredendal in the Western Cape reaches a high of 40 degrees. And don't forget that tomorrow will bring even higher temperatures to the region. Overnight lows indicating a fairly cool evening over the central and eastern parts of South Africa, lower teens for many places, while near the western coastline it's going to be an especially warm night, temperatures in the mid to lower 20s. Looking ahead to tomorrow afternoon, upper 30s for Springbok as well as for Cape Town, isolated thunder showers for Gauteng. Pretoria gets to 29 degrees once again, and on Thursday it remains mainly dry over the western parts of the country and temperatures rise across the south coast for George and Port Elizabeth.
It is breaking news that leads to the headlines this afternoon. The media application to televise Oscar Pistorius' murder trial has been approved.
Eskom admits its supply is under pressure and again urges consumers to reduce consumption.
Thank you. And two Soweto girls murdered in a suspected satanic killing have been laid to rest.
After the break, a new show, Earthwatch. Newsday back at the top of the hour.
In the next minute, the 47 babies born in Africa will open their eyes to a new world. And the 57 Africans who go online for the first time will see it in a new light too. In these 60 seconds, this continent will provide the world with 134 carats of diamonds and over 6,000 barrels of oil. In just 10 years, we'll have the world's youngest population living above this tremendous wealth. The question is, where will you be? Because for the 150 years we've been here, we're still amazed by what happens in a moment. They call it Africa, we call it home.
new Jaguar F-Type. Your turn.
An election is just months away, and this man has the biggest balancing act in the land. Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan must promise South Africans that a better life for all isn't far away. He must also convince the markets that South Africa is watching its debt. Will taxes go up or down? And how will the government spend your money? Join us on the 26th of February at 2 as we unpack the numbers, bringing you insight into what it means for you, your business, and most importantly, your pocket. ENCA, you deserve to know more.
Welcome to the very first episode of Earthwatch, coming to you from the Two Oceans Aquarium here in Cape Town, the show where we bring you your weekly dose of fun and fascinating stuff you need to know about the planet.
Coming up in today's show, the plight of the humble honeybee, an incredible encounter between a python and the engine of a car, and some handy tips about how you can clean out your garage.
But first, there is no denying it. Climate change is happening, and it's affecting nature in a myriad of ways. Here's a look at what's happening to the ocean, how rising seas are affecting beachfront property, and whether you should be worried.
This is Sea Point 75 years ago. This is Sea Point today. And this is what scientists predict Sea Point could look like in another 75 years.
This is a projection for the end of the century, okay? We don't want to scare people with this idea, but the fact is that every few millimeters a year across the planet eventually could lead to quite a catastrophic event close to the shore, especially when you couple that with a severe storm.
According to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the sea is rising by an average of 3 to 4 millimeters a year. The blue line on this graph predicts a scenario with effective climate mitigation. The red, a scenario with further unabated growth of emissions. However, a study by 90 sea level experts from 18 countries believes the estimates are conservative. But if you don't live near the beach, why should you care?
If you have a lot of money, you want to plan for the future. If you are very poor and you don't know where your next meal's coming from, then you don't really worry about the future. And this is very obvious in South Africa, where we have so many people that really can't even find the next meal. They are, quite honestly, not going to worry about these things. So we have to target those people and make them realize that it may not affect them today, but it may affect them in the future.
According to experts, the reason our seas are rising is because the temperature's increasing.
The atmosphere is heating up due to global warming. We're putting more fossil fuels into the atmosphere. We're warming the atmosphere. That heat has to go somewhere, and a lot of that heat goes into the ocean. So the oceans are also warming up. Now, what happens to seawater if you warm it up? It expands.
Here's a breakdown of the components influencing rising seas. Geocentric sea level refers to land that shifts up and down, affecting sea level.